Welcome back, everybody, to the Metal and Forge podcast, a weekly podcast discussing manhood, entrepreneurship, American life, and matters of the soul. The Metal and Forge podcast, also known as the best podcast you've never heard of. And I am here with my co-host, Patrick Miller, Austin Lapp, and I am Kent Lapp, and we do this thing weekly, the three of us, and we will have a fourth guest on at some point. We're getting close on a couple, so that will be happening from time to time. Look forward to that. Austin, you missed last week again. I don't know if this whole 3 strikes and you're out thing applies. I guess we'll find out sooner or later.
Maybe.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Jumped
no, but
into
it's good to have you back again.
Yeah.
It happens. It happens.
Yeah.
Hey, we're getting more consistent with our recording nights, so it'll hopefully happen less and less. That's not a threat. That's an observation. Hey, before we get into the show, guys, have you guys heard of Taylor Sheridan?
Yeah. Yellowstone.
No.
Yeah. Taylor Sheridan, the creator, writer of Yellowstone. He's a producer. I think Taylor Sheridan is something along the lines of the Elon Musk of storytelling through TV and movies. This guy is next level, and his movies are good too. He did Sicario 2. You know, those were good. Those are tougher movies to kind of watch 2-3 times. But particularly his TV shows. So yeah, he did Austin. He did Yellowstone, 1923, 1883, Tulsa King, which I watched some of. Mayor of Kingstown, which watched some of. And let's see what else. So his new shows are Lioness. We're watching those. Mariana really, really likes that one. I do too. It is very good. But his latest show, Landman, is this show is freaking awesome.
Where is it?
It's on Paramount Plus. A lot of his stuff is on Paramount Plus. I'm watching it on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
Maybe I have a Paramount Plus subscription through Amazon Prime that I don't know about, which is pretty likely, I guess. Unless Paramount Plus is included with Prime, I'm not really sure. But
I don't think so.
Anyhow, Landman is about the oil industry, and he just does such a masterful job of, the show is about the oil industry, but it's also about, like, this hardworking dude's relationship with his divorced wife who he can't say no to, and she's this crazy free-spirited person, and now they're getting back together, and he's got a daughter, and it just tells a story so well of, like, all the moving parts in a person's life. Like, you can be this bigwig, billionaire oil man, and that guy's not the main character in the show. Like, his chief operating officer is, who is Angelina Jolie, Billy Bob Thornton.
Gotcha.
Anyhow, that show is just fantastic.
It sounds great.
It's so good. But honestly, 1883 was so good also. 1883 might have been better than Yellowstone. I love Yellowstone, but he, when you hear these actors and actresses talk about Taylor Sheridan, they're basically like, they heard that Taylor Sheridan was going to be involved and they said yes immediately. Like, these actors are getting to the point where if it's a Taylor Sheridan movie or show, they're in. No questions asked, which is pretty rare.
Yeah, I haven't watched any of his movies, but really the only thing I've watched of his is Yellowstone. But I love Yellowstone, and I know enough about Taylor Sheridan that I would watch anything he makes. Just
if you watch
question.
Yellowstone and you liked it, Patrick, you really should watch 1883. We got to the end of 1883, and this was maybe a year ago. It was in the winter. We were sitting on the couch upstairs. We drugged some little TV up there, and we watched the last episode of that season. We just sat there. Just, Mariana's crying. I'm probably crying or trying not to. Just sat. Like, very few shows have that effect on you, but this dude, it's kind of like he has broken through the bullshit filters from the industry, whereas, like, the industry would kind of want you to do certain things that are catchy or weird, but it's like you're watching it as a viewer and you're like, that's just not real life, Taylor's stuff is very real life. Anyhow, Taylor Sheridan's just killing it, and that show Landman is awesome. I watched the first 4 episodes of Landman, and then it was like, hey babe, you might like this show too. And so I watched the first 4 episodes pretty much right away again with Mariana. And and I've never done that ever. All right, let's move on. Congrats to David Sachs with the All In podcast on being selected by Trump as the incoming AI and crypto czar. I'm super stoked about this. I think this is fantastic. Big fan of David Sachs. I feel like I've got to know him through the All In podcast. Straight shooter. He was part of the PayPal mafia, super successful guy. And I think this is just a really good pick. From what I've understand is crypto's been really hamstrung, particularly under the Biden administration, because their regulations have been very ambiguous, and the crypto guys have been asking for clear rules of the road so they know what to do. And then the administration says, yeah, it's legal, and then do this, and then they start doing it, and then they get slapped around and shut down and fined. And you got to have clear rules of the road for this. And the last administration, or the current administration, has not been doing that, and it's been kind of unfortunate. It's their way of shutting it down, So I think David Sachs is going to really help with that. And then on the AI front, look, history will tell, but it could be that David Sachs getting involved with AI at this point in time could possibly be a real fork in the road. And of course, the real fork in the road is the Trump administration. Otherwise, this wouldn't be happening. But I don't know if you guys were watching the Mark Andreessen podcast with Joe Rogan.
I haven't yet watched it, but I want to get to it.
Fantastic. And it's really cool seeing some of these tech guys crawl out of the woods a little bit and be a little bit more public, because these guys are some of the brightest, biggest ballers in the world. And this Mark Andreessen, I mean, this guy knows his stuff. And historically, you wouldn't really get to hear from a guy like that much, but that's happening more and more now, and it's pretty great. But he was saying that he was in a meeting with AI where the Biden people were basically letting him know this is how it's going to go down with AI in general. There's going to be 3 big companies. We're going to control them, and that's going to be that. The little guys are going to get snuffed out. And Joe asks Andreessen, well, what do you do? What do you do when you leave a meeting like that? And Andreessen says, you vote for Trump. And it was just a very clear, kind of concise, like, oh shit, kind of a moment. And so anyhow, if we think we have issues right now with censorship, which we do, that's going to get 1,000 times worse if the government starts censoring AI in a way that's politically advantageous. So we don't want that. And I think David Sachs is going to be good for crypto with regulation and AI with censorship. So I don't know much about like what that role entails. My understanding is that a czar doesn't really have, you're not like a integrated formal kind of position in the chain of command, but he's going to have input, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, Trump's putting together a pretty strong team overall, and this seems like a good addition.
Agreed. Okay, let's jump into the docket, brothers. We have, first up, jealousy. Let's talk about jealousy a little bit. Do you guys think this is predominantly a male thing, predominantly a female thing, or is it just this? Is it does it have sort of the same effect on either? Is it no different, and it's just kind of a human thing?
The one thing I was pondering tonight was, and not to derail too much, but I do want to know the difference between jealousy and envy, because if we're using scripture as a baseline, like it does use envy and jealousy differently. And I did a Google search, but I didn't like what I found. I just know that there, talks about God being a jealous God, but not an envious God. And so, I guess I just wanted some definition on, or what you guys, let's define jealousy, I guess, in the conversation.
Yeah. I think of them as I guess, largely synonymous, jealousy and envy.
Okay.
But
That's fine
Miller,
for this conversation. I'm not trying to derail. I just
well,
wanted to.
no, I mean, if there is, Miller, would you differentiate at all between jealousy and envy?
I mean, yeah, I think the idea of jealous God is something like, a God that wants to have all of our love and attention, because that's like in the way that you want your kids to have all the best things come to them in some sense. Like you're
Yep.
jealous for your kids like flourishing. You want, and so there's a desiring fullness there that I think is not there in envy. Like there's a way in which jealousy can be there's a way in which the term jealous can be used, which is a kind of positive aspect of God's character. But if we're talking about jealousy more in as it equates to envy, then I would say I can see like that's an easier discussion to have in some sense, because that's maybe the more base emotion that we feel when we experience envy, jealousy. It's that kind of base emotion of I want something that I see someone else have that I don't have, or some form of that story.
Correct. That's how I've been thinking about this. So let's focus on that for the sake of this conversation, because I think that's a good point, Austin. Like, I would consider myself a very jealous husband, and I don't apologize for that. I don't think it's wrong. I think it's totally fine. But I think that speaks to your point about God being a jealous God. But that's not really what I had in mind for this conversation. I guess what I was thinking of is more like someone has something that I also want, and
Yes.
and it is causing a discord in my soul, and it's causing a problem. It's unsettling. It's unsettling me, and it's it's creating envy in my heart. And that, I guess, is what I wanted to hone in on. So the envy / jealousy kind of is, that's the conversation I wanted to have. So yeah, this was sort of a last minute thought, was like, from what I understand, women can certainly be jealous of each other. Maybe, you know what? Maybe they tend to be a little bit more jealous of another person, whereas I kind of feel like for us, maybe at least for me, I'm oftentimes a little bit more jealous for what someone else has, like their things. But I don't know. I don't know if it's a thing that tends to be more common with male or female, or if it's just across the board. It more depends on the person. But Miller, I am curious, is that definition of jealousy kind of how you would think of it? And what have you learned about jealousy? What are your thoughts?
I have definitely felt jealousy in the past, but I don't feel it's not something I experience a lot today. But I can take you back to a time when I experienced just straight up envy at a neighbor, 5 years ago maybe. And so we lived in a nice neighborhood in Franklin, Tennessee, and my neighbor, I see him, I'm out on my porch, and I see my neighbor drive by in a brand new Porsche 911 Turbo. Beautiful, my dream car, gorgeous. And I kind of know the guy, and I'm like, what? How does he, I want that. And I had this kind of existential crisis where I'm like, wait, he's my neighbor. It's like, why does he have that? And I don't, essentially, is the kind of, and I remember actually experiencing envy in this kind of, I was pissed. It was very immature and very, looking back, it seems kind of, crazy, but I just felt that. And it started this loop of unhelpful thoughts in my mind about the stories I was believing about why he has that and why I don't, and what, I'm resentful because I didn't get to, I'm broke and he's got the new 911. It's just this straight up, childish envy. And I remember that day having two key revelations actually about me, about God, that still stick with me to this day. And one was this: God brought to my mind this verse about, whatever things are good, true, of good report, etc., think on those things. And immediately I was convicted. I'm like, I'm not thinking on things that are good, true, and of good report. Like I was kind of seething, and so that conviction set in about that I'm not thinking good things, that it's not true. I'm actually believing a lie actively. And then the next point of clarity that the Spirit brought, that actually, straight, serious story, it struck me to my knees, was that God showed me that envy was the envy of Cain, that I was Cain. And I got so convicted of it, I knew it was true immediately, that I fell to my knees and I wept. I was like, holy shit, I'm fucking Cain. And it just struck me to my core. And I know I immediately going deep with this conversation, but it was like one of the deepest, most profound experiences I've had in that realm of knowing something, of being convicted of something and knowing something was true immediately in a way that just cut to the core. And I think for a day, the only prayer that I was so struck by that realization that I literally couldn't pray any prayer save but one, which was, Christ be merciful to me, a sinner. I prayed that over and over and over for like a day. That's how deep of an experience it was to come to, like the Porsche set it off, which led to me on my knees in my office going, Christ be merciful to me, a sinner. It was a very profound experience, and it stuck with me to this day. So whenever I think of envy, I think of it through the lens of Cain. Cain looked at his older brother. He saw someone who was sacrificing properly, and he was reaping the fruits of it. And it was evident in the glory in his life. And Cain knew that he could have, and he didn't. And he resented the hell out of it, and he struck him down. Rather than being faced with that ideal, seeing that judge as being what he could have been if he'd have sacrificed properly and gone all in, and all of that. It's like the temptation is to pull down the ideal, to destroy the ideal, so we're not faced with it. It's like put it in the dirt. And it's like that revelation in that moment was like, it just burned all that away. And so I really don't experience envy or jealousy of other people almost to any degree about anything anymore. God, I took care of it
since that
day.
moment. So that was a very defining moment as it relates to jealousy.
Mm-hmm.
And envy. Now, what do you think was it that was so profound about that? Because if you were praying, God be merciful to me, a sinner, for a day, you had some real sense of depravity in that area.
Yep.
And how depraved, that depravity was.
Yeah.
Was it because you could see the story and how it went with Cain, and it literally led to murder and then a different outcome of his life probably because of that track? What do you think it was that landed so heavily on you about that? Or I guess another way to say it is, what did you see about jealousy that caused you to believe it was such a sinister thing?
I think, just the realization, because I had been thinking, I'd listened to Jordan Peterson talk about the story of Cain and Abel, and there's a lot of interesting things that he reveals about that story that you can take it or leave it, but it's got me thinking about it. And so when I saw that pattern emerge in my life, immediately it was like the Holy Spirit just like locked onto that and said, that's the spirit from that story. You've been living that out, buddy. And I knew that was true. Like I knew that I had not gone all in on life. I knew that I'd played it safe. I knew that I had used my words to manipulate reality around me and to and used my words in an instrumental way rather than in a totally truth-speaking way. And I hadn't gone all in on who God had made me to be. I was committing the same sin that Adam and Eve committed in some sense, which is to believe that, or to fear that God is holding out on you, and that you have to reserve some locus of control for yourself in order to get what you need. And I think all of that came to head in that moment. Is like, that's how you've been living. And it was just this fundamental shift in consciousness for me.
The other thing that stands out to me is this was your experience in that story, and it was also the experience of the Cain and Abel story, which is that the one difference between jealousy and, let's say, desire would be you desire something on your own.
That's right.
Jealousy seems to always involve someone else and what they have or what they're doing, and you want it, and why can't you have that? And it sort of leads to like frustration and angst and even kind of worry a little bit, and you know, just a lot of things that aren't any good. But it strikes me that that's one big differentiator between jealousy and desire. In the case of desire, there might not be anyone involved. You just desire something, and a lot of times it's probably a good thing.
That's right.
But that's very different with jealousy.
I very much desire a Porsche 911, but I'm not jealous if anyone's anymore. So
right.
No.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So the same.
I mean, I've loved that car since I was a kid, but
I mean, what a car! Come on. The two parts of you that want the same thing, but the one is the absolute wrong way to get there and will cause death in your life, and the other might be just fine, and the end result could potentially be the same. Isn't that something?
Well, it's actually better now because I'll get to enjoy that 911 in totally free from worrying about what anybody thinks about it. Because if I'd have got it out of jealousy, I'd be consumed about what other people think about it.
True. Sure.
So now I can go buy a 911 and enjoy it and not give a shit what other people think about it and never think about what they think about it. You know, so you know, there's a freedom in that comes from learning that.
Yeah. Austin, I'm curious, is this something that you've dealt with in some seasons more than others maybe, and if so, what seems to trigger it, and what have you learned about jealousy?
Today.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it definitely is. It's a cyclical thing for me, and so I don't know. Earlier this year, I was struggling with it, and just kind of like tired of it, you know, because I was really just wanting what someone else had, and so I picked up this book. Let's see if I can show it here. Envy by Bob Sorge. Yeah, Sorge.
Sorge?
Sorge. S-O-R-G-E.
S-O-R-G-E, okay.
Yeah, overcoming the hidden emotion that holds God's plans hostage. And there's a definition in here that just kind of like struck me. I haven't made it all the way through the book. It's kind of a thick book. It's not entirely my style, but I like and then I'll dive into my story. I remember reading Secular Magazine once to find envy as the pain felt when someone has what you want. And call it jealousy, call it envy, call it whatever you want. I don't really care. But that to me summarizes what I struggle with. And so I think it has to do because the only thing I know that works as the antidote is gratitude. When I'm not focusing on what I'm blessed with, on what God has given me, on a healthy family and a marriage that's, you know, thriving, and a business that's growing, and grateful for that, then I start to look around. And I think for me, the dipstick is always like, okay, well, let me think of somebody in my sphere. You know, it's easy to like celebrate someone else's success. That's, you know, if we're grading ourselves by levels, you know, like whether it comes to wealth, family, houses, lands, whatever you want to call it, it's easy for me to celebrate someone who's like 3 or 4. If I'm at level 5 and they're to 8 or 9,
yeah.
I can easily celebrate that. But when me and my buddy started out at level 4 or level 3, and I'm at 5 and he's at 7 or 8, I find myself wishing that he would come down a few notches, maybe lose some employees or something goes wrong with his business, and just so that I can feel good about my level 5. But if you look
Right.
at the Word of God, it says he gave one talent, one 3, and one 5. There is nothing in there that says why he did it. It wasn't based on merit. It wasn't based on what they did. It wasn't based on anything other than that. He just did. He just did. He just gives some more than others. And we just have to be okay with what he gives us and invest what he gives us. And when I start this whole comparison thing, for me, it has to do with specifically what people have. Now, I'm not going to speak for the women, but I can tell you my wife will use the same language I use about what another woman, how she looks. Man,
That's
that
what I
woman
was kind of
had
thinking earlier. That tended
had
to be a little bit
5
more
babies
common.
and she looks like Barbie, or like just things like that. Like I hear those kind of comments. And again, I'm not throwing her under the bus. I'm just saying, like, I hear those comments more from her, and I'm more like, they're building a new house, or they bought this new vehicle, or just things like that. And so I was really struggling with it actually today. And to be honest, like, this is one of the best years I've had in my business. I'm like, why? What's wrong with me? Like, I really am doing well. And what is going on why is my heart doing this? And I just felt like, and this is specifically about work. And I felt like the Lord just in a moment being like, go back over all the deals you've closed, over every success you've had this year, and thank me for it. And so I haven't started doing it yet. So I'm inviting you into a story that's unfolding yet to, come through the other side. But for me, it's always come down to gratitude. And, there's this verse in Deuteronomy chapter 8, I think it says, it's one of my favorite chapters in the Bible, actually. It's this obscure hidden book that I don't really know much about, but I love that chapter. He says, the context is like he's telling the Israelites, I'm going to take you out and you're going to be, I'm going to you're going to be captive for a while, and then you're going to come out, and I'm going to bless you. You're going to live in the promised land, or whatever he says. And he's like, and I'm going to add all these things to you. You're going to have this, and houses and lands, and copper, and milk and honey, and all this stuff. And then there's this verse in the middle where he says, but don't forget me, lest you forget it is I who give you the power to get wealth. And like that verse, I just stamp that on my heart, and I try to keep that in front of me. And it's when I start to beat my own chest and toot my own horn. And again, I have a part to play. I know I do in this whole thing. But when I overemphasize me and comparing my three talent to someone's 7 or 8 or whatever you want to call it, that's when I slip into jealousy and envy, and then it's just a downhill ride from there. So that's the only way I know out of it is gratitude. But
Yeah.
obviously, I've got some growing to do in it.
Yeah. Another thing I've noticed too is the out of sight, out of mind thing definitely comes into play here, because it's one thing to hear that someone, bought the brand new Porsche 911 Turbo, and it's another thing to see it drive by. It's one thing to hear that, someone bought, some awesome, beautiful, lake home. And it's another thing to be there. You know what I mean? Like, jealousy seems to be something about seeing it, at least for me. It triggers it in a way that sometimes, in a way that it just wouldn't if you just heard about it, But I wonder, I guess if you think about what's happening with jealousy is the devil, literally or metaphorically, whatever, the epicenter of evil is in a way he's sort of outsourcing some of the work of tearing people down, because you're exactly right about, like, if you're at level 3 and someone was even to level 2 and all of a sudden now you're at level 5 but they're at level 8,
That hurts.
that there it does, and it can
Yeah.
and there is some sick part of the human nature that might, even just for a flash, might be tempted to want to see something bad happen to pull them down a little bit. And if that intent goes unchecked, because this is where it can go wrong, is because sometimes people do act on it and they do actually try to pull people down because they are jealous. They can do it with their words,
Right.
actions, whatever it is. And that's really, really sinister. But if you think about it, it's a really good strategy, because instead of the devil going after that person himself to just try to pull that person down, if he can infect 6 or 8 people around him and have those 6 or 8 people around him be actively working to pull him down too, that's a really, really effective strategy.
Yeah, it's very dehumanizing when we get stuck in those kind of thought patterns. Like it does. It's it's one of the things that the devil uses to destroy people, for sure. One of the other antidotes, I love what you said about gratitude being an antidote to jealousy and envy. I think one of the other ones that I think about is like, what is envy rooted in? It's almost rooted in kind of a fixed pie mentality where, if he has more, that means there's less for me. And I don't believe that about reality. Like, I don't think of reality as a fixed pie thing. And so I think maybe abundance is the word I'm looking for, like looking at the world through the lens of abundance. Like it's almost an antidote to envy or jealousy. Because now when I see somebody, now when I get to experience that lake house, or, see somebody buy a beautiful property or something, guys that are young, up and coming, who are 10 years younger than me now, who are just crushing it. And I'm inspired, because that means that kind of thing is possible, and it's like, I let it show me what my desires actually are. And it's like, it's okay to desire those things, but I celebrate it in them. And, it's like, oh yeah, I'd love to do, I think I'm going to do something like that too sometime when the time is right for me. It's like, let it be an inspiration, like let it make it clear what you really want. If it inflames your desires, let's say, like, oh, cool. Well, I do want that. But I want it because I want that, not because he has it or whatever. So, and kind of set you free from that. But I think an abundance mindset and a gratitude mindset are two antidotes to that.
That's good. The other thing that I don't always do it because it's really hard, but is I pray for that person to be blessed the way that I would want to be blessed.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
I love
really,
that.
I don't actually love it.
No, I know, but it's good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. Yeah. No, it's just it feels. I mean, celebrating someone else's victory that you want is a huge key to getting that victory yourself. So I found, and there's just certain people that I just need to do it more often than not. And it's interesting. And some of it has to do with the field that I'm in. Like, I mean, real estate's just very competitive. Just always has been. It's never not been competitive as long as I've known. And I haven't worked in another industry in so long. And I actually, I see a lot, and I can tell when other agents who aren't rooted or grounded in that abundance mindset, and it's like trusting God, that's a big part of it. It's like, well, he brought you this far. Why would he hang out to dry now? If they're not rooted in that concept of that abundance mindset, like I can, your emotions ebb and flow with the deals. And right now, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, it's just slow. It's not always slow, but like historically it's slower. like it's typically slower, and so I think that's the other reason I'm struggling with it. But I'm like, you know what? What if that's his design? Like, what if he's like, hey, you've had a banger year. Like, here, take a month off, or take a month and slow down. Like,
Yeah.
don't worry about kicking the door down right now. This is a season where I'd like you to be grateful and reflect on all the goodness in your life, and then a little while seasons will change and things will kick up again. I don't know. I just feel like I'm relearning the same thing again and again and again in my life. But
Yeah.
yeah.
The grass is greener thing definitely comes into play too, because one of the things that I don't know if I thought of it so much. No, I did. There was times this summer where I was a little bit jealous of those that were an entrepreneur, that owned their business and were able to work on it and not just simply work in it, because right now I am just working in it. Like if I'm not making sales, then everything stops. But I remember the time when you had people working in it and you could just work on it. And then if you do decide to take 3 days off, or you do something different with your time for half a day or a day or a week, really the immediate result of the business is generally fairly mitigated. But when you're working in it, you take 3 days off and everything comes to a grinding halt. But then I remembered that, hey, dude, just remember that you're actually enjoying sort of this solopreneur thing right now, and how when you actually, and that you really wanted this just a year ago when you were a W-2 employee, and that this is really what you wanted, and you are doing it. And when you started doing it, you actually thought to yourself a bunch of times, man, this is a nice break. No employees, it's just you and contractors basically. And so the grass is greener thing comes into play with jealousy also. What I noticed for myself in the last, I would say 4 years, or I noticed it maybe probably I feel like I had this clarity probably about 2-3 years ago, which was, for me, the cocktail for me that I've struggled the most with are three things: pride, shame, and jealousy. And if I think back kind of on my life, whether I was aware of it or not, those are the three things that I've probably dealt with, struggled with, been hampered by or whatever the most. And that's kind of embarrassing, because that is such a deadly cocktail. Good grief. The pride thing, I don't find myself struggling with that really at all. Shame, I really worked through a lot in the last few years, but really haven't felt much of that in the last year or two, which is really good. But probably have dealt with jealousy a little bit more. It's just the jealousy thing that, I just want to talk about it with you guys, because I kind of felt like maybe more people might be dealing with it than are talking about it, because I don't really find the conversation out there really at all or much. And it's just, for me anyway, it's almost like a kind of an embarrassing thing to even say out loud or admit, because it's so dumb. It's so dumb. But Patrick, do you think that possibly it has roots in almost like almost like the survival of the fittest, or like almost like is the evolutionary value to jealousy that, hey, if they have it, that means you don't have it, so you better get it, because if you want to continue to live your little caveman life, you better go get that freaking buffalo that he just shot over there and get it back to your cave. That thing belongs in your cave. Go get that thing. You shouldn't have that, and then you're here with no bison to eat. Do you think like maybe it has some roots in that a little bit, and we just sort of are still sort of just have that caveman instinct about us a little bit?
I think that's a great way to think about it through that lens, because all of our development in that time frame took place in a scarcity, environment where, to a large degree, like there was an element of, exactly that, which is there was a limited amount of food available, a limited amount of resources. And if he had it, that means you didn't, and you wanted it, and maybe you needed it to survive. Like I think there was an element of that, that influence, and that's probably, it's those old stories that are still kind of in our DNA, and it's why that's an impulsive thing to think sometimes. Like it's almost, yeah, you're struck with that desire that you want something that someone else has.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Another thing that I have noticed is, and this just is sort of obvious and stands to reason totally, but we tend to be jealous of the things that are in the category of what we most want. And I can give you a couple examples. For some people, what they most want is to be healthy and fit. They don't really care if they're making bank. They don't, really care if they even have the most influence or whatever, but they really care about their body. And those types of people would tend to be more jealous of someone who's maybe super fit. And then another category is maybe, what I've noticed is not too many pastors are in it for the money. Like, there are some exceptions to this, but by far, pastors are not, money is not their primary motivator for almost all of the pastors, because, man, you're in the wrong business if money is your driving factor. But they might tend to be jealous of a fellow pastor who got this sweet book deal, because their thing is a little bit more about influence. That's sort of their thing in life, is a little bit more about influence. Some people, it might be a little bit more about power. But I think a lot of business people, I don't really know this, but I'm just kind of assuming because of the nature of it, it's money is more what they're after, which is, I want to be healthy, but I could kind of give two shits about a lot of stuff, but I do want enough money. I want nice things. I want to, you know what I mean? Like, that's definitely my thing, is the money front. So I think it hits people different ways, kind of depending on what they're sort of most want. I don't know if you would say most want out of life, but what their sort of driving motivation is, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So spinning off the money thing, like what do you want that money gives you? Like, and I'm not judging you. I'm just curious. Like, you said something there that I'd like to hear a little bit more. What is it about money?
Yeah.
What do you want to do with your money?
A little bit a little bit more time freedom, probably. But in this stage, ski trips with the boys, better schools for all the kids. At some point, a Cybertruck.
Okay, first thing you've mentioned right there, by the way.
What's that? Oh, the first thing.
That's the first actually physical. The rest of it's been for your kids and quality of life.
Yeah. Well, that is definitely the driving factor right now.
Okay.
That's what I have, to be honest with you guys, when I sort of lost everything 4 years ago, that is the thing that metaphorically keeps me up at night. Not too much keeps me up at night, and that included for the most part, but that's the thing I think about the most was, for me, it's kind of whatever the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. And, you never sort of set out to lose everything, but with 5 kids and the season that they're in, that is the thing that is very motivating for me to try to get income back up as quick as possible, because I feel like time is really running out. I mean, Lincoln's 14, Jericho, just to be brutally honest with you guys, because for me, it is, I guess I just wasn't used to saying no to stuff because I didn't have the money in the past, to be honest. There was lots of stuff that I had to say no to because I didn't have nearly enough. But it was stuff that no one else was doing that stuff anyway. You know what I mean? Like, if I wanted to go skiing, I go skiing. And, now to take 3 boys skiing to Colorado, because, come on, like driving 3 hours to Indiana to some 500-foot slope is total bullshit. To go, you're 10 grand in. Like the tickets are $1,500 probably per, So there's 4,500 and lodging, and you're 7-8 grand in pretty quick.
Yeah.
So
So
they're asking
I
for
guess
this?
my point is,
Okay.
Jericho just asked me today, we going
Oof.
skiing this winter? I'm like, probably not. Why
That'd be
is that?
painful.
Well, it takes a lot of time and money, and right now, it's just, saying no to something the boys want to do because
Yeah.
I don't have the money for it, it
Oh, dude.
sucks. It's
Knife
not
in
a
heart.
position. Yeah, it really is. And so they've been
Okay.
asking, Jericho hasn't gone with us to Colorado yet to go skiing. The last time we went was a few years ago. Lincoln and Jackson went. They loved it. I mean, I grew up on the slopes with my dad. So it's stuff like that in this season that I would really like the money for, which is interesting because it's just a different season of life. Like I didn't feel this way 10 years ago. I was doing different
Right.
things with the money then, but yeah, it is for me, some people might want power, some people might want influence, that type of thing, but just give me the money. just give me the money and I'm
And
good.
that's fair. I mean, like I was just curious, like what was driving you? Because I'm like, I mean, I was just down there, and I'm like, man, dude, I feel like, I mean, again, like outside looking in, I'm like, sure, their life isn't perfect, and but I was like watching your kids like ripping around the neighborhood in their dirt bikes, and hearing the stories. Well, I mean, I'm like, man, they got a pretty good life.
Absolutely do.
Yeah,
Absolutely do.
I'm not
Yep.
saying that you're not saying that. I just was like curious what was motivating it, because I'm like, you've never been. I mean, knowing you, like you've not really been motivated by stuff that much. I mean, you drive a Range Rover one year and a minivan the next, and I'm like, okay, like, and not saying that you don't like nice stuff. I just was curious what it was, and that makes
Yeah.
total perfect sense. Like,
Yep. Yeah, it's really that. But yeah, I totally, Austin, just to reinforce your thing about gratitude, I totally agree with that because that is what I will do. I'll start to, and I just did it recently in the last couple of weeks, just thinking with God sort of about, well, what do I have? And then you start to list it off, and then you realize half of what I just listed off, I did not have to have, probably don't even deserve. And so the gratitude thing, it's such an antidote for, and it's interesting because it's peppered so much throughout the Bible, but it's almost like it's one of those things that's listed so much you can almost glaze off the top of it.
yeah,
But
100%.
it is really powerful. And actually just in the last 2 weeks, at some point, I was up late over the Thanksgiving holiday or something, and I was feeling really, really angsty. And I was actually worried if like I had eaten something or drank something or smoked a little something that was like, might have been laced a little something. Like it was like that. But I was also like, no, I'm pretty sure it's not. Like this is just sort of some paranoia here. But I was laying up in bed, trying to go to sleep, and I was just really kind of in a discord, and my heart was like pounding, and I just was like taking deep breaths and was listing off what I am grateful for. And dude, I'm telling you, like almost immediately, I was
Really?
like 3 items in. Oh, almost immediately. I was like 3 items in, and my breath started to regulate. My heart slowed
insane.
down. I got further down the list, and I just drifted off. I mean, the gratitude thing is really powerful.
That's so cool. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that whole thing. Well, I feel like I'm robbing myself right now because I know that
Whose music playing?
I like it.
Miller, is that you or me? What the heck?
I think I hit.
Was that you?
I went to unmute myself and I hit one of the sound pad buttons. Sorry about that.
Not bad. Can we plug that into the podcast? We could use that in our transitions.
That could be our bumper. I can
Yeah,
use that as our
honestly.
bumper music.
Yeah, let's hang on to that.
Oh, man.
It's
Yeah.
like right underneath the mute button. So sorry.
Okay. What were you saying, Austin?
I feel like I'm robbing myself of a, like, I am trying to be really, really intentional over the next, because, okay, from now until New Year's, in my industry, people aren't really focused on, the push isn't there. You know what I mean? Like, the drive isn't there to sure, you've got things that you're trying to wrap up. Everyone has year-end stuff, but like, it's not July 1st. It's not May 1st. It's like, it's not go time. So like, why do I expect it to always be go time? Because I'm like, okay, I have a limited time here of like 3 weeks where I actually feel that I can potentially take more time off, and I can take more time for myself, and I can do some reflection, and I can be grateful, and I can be intentional, and just be more in the moment. Enjoy the Christmas parties, enjoy the season that I'm in. And I'm so sick and tired of getting through, whatever season, like, this season, and looking back over and be like, wow, like I didn't get to do that. I didn't get to, I robbed myself of a season of gratitude. And so and every day ticks by and I look back, I'm like, hey, when did I do what I wanted to do today? I didn't. I just went to work and made myself busy with things I wouldn't have had to. I guess that's what I'm going through right now.
Yeah. Well, I think I think that is not uncommon. And the thing about seasons is they're hard to sort of sometimes notice it when you're in them.
Mm-hmm.
But like, you're already saying this, and you're saying it because you are aware of it. But come April of next year, you're going to be going for it. It's going to be rocking April, May, whenever.
Mm-hmm.
And you will have wished that you did chill out a little bit more over
That's how
the
it happens
holiday season.
all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
yeah. So do that.
Yeah. I'm not as bad as I used to be, but I feel like I'm still. I just noticed today, putting the dipstick in my heart. I'm like, very timely, Kent. You're talking about jealousy and envy or whatever, because I feel like I just don't want to be in this season. I just want to be writing deals and selling stuff and moving, shaking, but I'm just not supposed to be right now.
What keeps you from just taking 2 or 3 weeks off and like going like super minimal and just going, I'm going to, like, is it like trying to squeeze the last bit of juice out of whatever could be there kind of thing, or sense of duty to somebody? Or
I think it's hard. I think I associate my value with the hours that I put in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more what I struggle with than anything. My sense of self-worth is tied into my production, if you know what I mean. And that's at the core of it, and that's what I'm trying to work through. That's like, as Mennonites, or in that background, it's just very, very, very hard to turn off work.
Yeah,
I'm just not that good at it.
Would you worry about what people? Sorry, go ahead, Miller.
I was just going to ask, like, as it relates to like Sabbath, the idea of Sabbath, and there's this idea that the Sabbath, we are in the Sabbath, rest with Christ in some sense. And so it's like, can you work from a place of rest, or work from a different energy that's, where you can be in this, in a kind of non-striving kind of, where it's like work for, because I always think about like, what's my aim with how much I want to work, and how hard I want to work, and how long, all of that. It's like, I actually do want to work as hard as I can in seasons and for as long as I can. And I want to develop mastery, but I want to develop the kind of mastery that makes the tools light in my hand. And then I can, work hard, and then like comes from a place not of striving, but of like, oh, this is who I am. This is what I do. And but then that requires like these patterns where you go rest and recharge, like, because, well, I mean, I don't have to tell you, like, we're not made to go, even the idea of Sabbath being on a weekly basis, it's like we can't just go full steam all the time, like we crash. Like we need that interrupt of, rest. But then in the idea of like spreading that out over a wider time span, let's say our career, or, the season of your career that you're in now, it's like going up and to the right for 7 years, or whatever. Like striving, like if you never have a season where for a couple of weeks you can just like, breathe and Sabbath kind of, or whatever, that idea. Yeah. I'm curious what this kind of maybe what the narrative is that's driving that. But you mentioned the Mennonite work ethic thing, and that makes sense to me. I see that.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's probably, if I were to be honest, I feel like that's what, spiritually speaking, that's what the Lord's trying to call me into. Like, hey, like, no, you don't have to. Like, just let's hit it hard after the year's up, and this is your time of gratitude, reflection, and maybe gaining some vision for the next year. I'm getting there. I mean, like today was rough, but I feel like there was times last week where it was definitely better than it was today.
Nice.
So yeah, there's things that I'm wrapping up, and hopefully, end of this week, things will really cool down, and then the rest of the year I'll just,
Yeah.
Well, thanks for letting us into that kind of unfolding story in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. No doubt. And you know what, Austin, objectively, I will bet you if you took the rest of this month, just took it off, handled whatever you had to handle from your phone, and if you had a closing, you went to it, and if you had a showing, you went to it, but other than that, you just took it. I will bet you, dude, you're going to sell the same amount as if you just kept working every day. You know what I mean? That's what's crazy about it.
I can look at it mathematically. Like, this doesn't work. Math doesn't work with it. Doesn't work with emotion. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
I can look back year over year and see the years where I know that I haven't worked as hard, end quotes, and but the numbers are still the same, if not slightly higher. And so,
yeah.
And that's funny because it's what the real estate coaching he's been helping me with a lot. He's been pushing on me with some of the stuff, and he kind of eats at me. I think we've talked about that before, but he's right. I mean, just really pushing on my pressure points, and well, what have you done for yourself this year? What do you mean? He's like, you're telling me that you've done all this, had an amazing year, and it doesn't mean anything to you. Why not? I'm like, that's I don't know.
Yeah.
So no, it's all good. I feel like I have the pieces to complete the puzzle. I just gotta
Yep.
let them. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Let's go on to the next topic we have teed up here, which is how to manage ridiculous and unhelpful thoughts. And I'm looking forward to getting you guys' thoughts on this too, kind of what works for you guys. But I think we've all probably dealt with ridiculous and unhelpful thoughts from time to time, and it probably won't be the last time. And I don't know if you guys experienced this, but I've experienced my brain occasionally looping on some really dark thoughts every now and then, and not even necessarily like lustful thoughts, but just what I would describe as like some stupid shit, that's not helpful in any way, is harmful, and almost feels like wind gusts from hell or something. And my brain will like latch onto it, and it's really freaking stupid and dumb and unhelpful and stupid and dark. And it'll like get stuck there. And it's frustrating because when it's doing that, it's not being clear and clean and positive and good and bright and useful, and it's being a net negative. In those times, my brain is being a net negative on basically my entire existence instead of being a net positive. And it sort of like will loop on that. And I was just kind of curious with you guys, have you ever experienced that? And again, I don't think I'm necessarily talking about like this fleeting, bullshit thought, maybe a fleeting lustful thought even. But if that's all you've experienced, then that counts too. But I'm thinking on something more like your brain kind of dwells on that's not helpful. For me, because I wouldn't say I deal with this a lot, but I've dealt with it enough that like it's been in the back of my mind that I've wanted to talk with you guys about it at some point. So for me, I kind of have like two things that I've used to mitigate this. I guess one would kind of be a strategy and the other would be a tactic, but the first is just sort of the obvious, and you see this in the Bible too, which is just like trying to keep my mind full of good things. Like I think of that one time where wasn't Jesus that cast a demon out and said something like, if good doesn't come into this vacant spot, basically the bad is just that evil is just going to come back like 10 times worse or something like that. That's really butchering it, but it's the idea that like if a container is full of good things, then bad things basically can't get into it, and like that concept, we see it in the Bible, and that concept makes a ton of sense. And then also the Bible talks about like think on things that are good and pure and beneficial and those types of things. So I mean that's sort of, I guess, the strategy that I would think of, which I would include all of that. But for me, it would even include like having a compelling vision, being productive, learning, stretching my mind, listening to podcasts, stretching my realm of understanding, I mean, pondering, studying certain scriptures, like being fascinated by like the good, the true, the beautiful, why is it that way, that type of thing. Like, I'm totally not just sitting around like thinking about all that all the time, obviously. But every now and then, it is fun to like think about like, I've done this every now and then, like, well, I actually want to just see like, what does the scripture say about hell, and then on a Sunday afternoon, just dig through all the passages and kind of study that. And then your mind is kind of thinking on, that type of thing like that. That's sort of the strategy, I guess, is like trying to have my mind be busy in a good way. And to be excited about like where we're going, what we're doing, what our path is, the life we're setting up for ourselves, to have, to be excited, I guess, about all those things is sort of, I think, includes having your mind be full of good things. But the other is a very kind of tactical, I guess, just a very practical tactic or a tactical strategy. I don't know. Which is, this was something that sort of, I guess, I started to develop if I had a particular thought pattern hit me, which is to develop, kind of pre-develop or predetermine an association that would become an off-ramp for my thoughts. And so let's say my mind was racing, just to give you a ridiculous example here that might work, but if my mind is going to loop around like Georgia, then my off-ramp might be like peaches. And then so then my mind starts to like loop on this stupid, ridiculous, dark shit. And then and then as soon as that starts happening, then I think peaches. Oh, peaches, fresh fruit. They grow on trees. I wonder who picks these things. Do they spray pesticides on them? No, they might be organic. Are they hiring illegal people to pick these things? Do they hire W-2? Are there insurance? Peaches are great. I wonder what the business model is for peaches. The next thing you know, I'm far enough down the off-ramp that I sort of like get out of the loop, and it sort of like tracks me away. And then now we're back into like sane people world again. So what have you guys dealt with this? What works for you? I'm curious to know what your thoughts.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I guess I don't know exactly what kind of thoughts you're talking about, but certainly unhelpful and looping persistent thoughts is something that I'm familiar with. I don't experience that as much now, but I think like seriously know what you're talking about. And it feels like the kind of thing that you almost don't have power over, or you almost don't, like, it's hard to get a lever to kind of get a grip on it when you're in that kind of loop. And somebody explained it as the neural connections in your mind. So like what fires together wires together. So when you think a certain thought, there's certain parts of the brain that are activated and it kind of fires. And so there's these neural pathways that develop, and certain kind of loops can almost, become this preferential neural pathway, like firing together and wiring together. And they described it as, when you're going down a ski slope, like there's these, after people have been skiing for a while, there's these kind of tracks that appear, where the grooves where people this is where people go essentially. And it kind of, creates these grooves, and that's where everybody then funnels down through pretty much through those. And then they come and they groom it, with the groomer, and that makes it all fresh and even again. And our mind has the same kind of impact, where it's like it almost develops these kind of tracks of thinking about things. So these looping thoughts, or, things narratives that we really, get stuck on, or whatever, stories we tell ourselves, or unhelpful mental frameworks, whatever. It's like they get looped in there, and sometimes they're even associated with trauma, and there's triggers and all that stuff that kind of, fire that neural circuit to kind of start happening. So in that sense, like, there are practical things to do to kind of reset to kind of groom that to a certain extent, and kind of get the grooves out and kind of reset, increase your brain plasticity, make new neural connections. There's practical things you can do for that. But then I'm sure Austin's going to probably speak to the spiritual component of it too, because there's a spiritual aspect to it more than just the strict biological aspect. I mean, certainly the resetting of those pathways, or the kind of giving a chance for that to get groomed, kind of like maybe as the ice gets groomed at a hockey game, the Zamboni or whatever, or the ski slope gets groomed. Like, psychedelics are a good, like, that's a framework for understanding what psychedelics do to the neural pathways, or the connections in your mind. Is it kind of grooms it and gives it a chance for those ruts that are worn in to get filled in, and get kind of a fresh start in a way for new connections to happen. So that's one kind of practical thing that, like, that's a downstream benefit, as described in, why people are studying psychedelics for helping with certain kinds of mental illnesses and stuff, or suffering from depression or anxiety and all that.
And addictions.
And
addictions too is a big one.
Yeah, because addiction is like a fundamental part of that looping. Like, there's a looping thought around addiction that's. But Austin, you mentioned it, Kent, about having a vision, having something in front of you that you desire. And I think that's a big part of keeping your mind healthy, is having a clear vision of what you are aiming at, and noticing when you're making progress towards it, and all of that. I think that helps keep those negative or destructive thought patterns at bay. So.
Yeah. Austin, you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, for me, as it relates to, addiction, pornography being my Achilles heel, like, there was a moment where there was a massive breakthrough for me in that struggle, where I realized there were some things that happened in my past. There were unresolved issues in my heart and in my mind that I had to work through. But freedom's a process, right? So while that helped, you're never like home free. So it was like my heart was set free of a lot of pain, a lot of bitterness, a lot of things that happened or I had allowed to happen to me in the past. But then over the next, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, there's patterns in my brain that I had to work. Like, I know what you're talking about with neural pathways. Because what would happen is, just practically speaking, when there was stress or an emotion in my life, excuse me, I got a cough. An emotion in my life I didn't know how to deal with, I would find my body wanting to medicate. And for me, that was pornography. For some people, it's drinking or substance abuse of some kind. Any type of addiction, be it substance, pornography, or whatever that you're using to medicate, or that your body leans towards when you're in stress, like, that's to me an alarm bell. And so, okay, well, then I had to do the work of, like, all right, so how am I going to redo these pathways in my brain? And I mean, like, I feel like I'm as free as I've ever been, but you're never home free, because, you can always revert back to your old patterns and pathways, but they become more overgrown the less you use them.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as snapping out of them, I mean, I was just thinking of it this past weekend, like just trying to be, it's like, man, what? Like, why am I feeling the pull? What's going on in my life? There's something underlying here that I need to take care of. If I don't, it will result in sin. It will result in medication. It will result in because those type of things like porn, substance abuse on a consistent basis, to me, it's a fruit of something. And you can cut the fruit off tree, it's just gonna grow back. And so the problem is it's hard for people to do the work. And I mean, we know people who, their lives are wrecked because they don't want to do the work. They don't want to dig through the mud and the dirt and the stones and get to because you can't see the roots. You can see the fruit, you can't see the roots. Problem with getting the roots, it's messy, it's muddy. It rains, the hole fills with water, you got to clean it out. But I mean, just do the work. So I just would like to tell everyone, just do the work. Just don't stop. If you mess up, just get back to work. Figure out what's going. And Jesus talks about it. Lay the axe to the root of the tree. Just keep doing the work.
Yeah. That's a good word. 100%.
And really, one of the things you're saying is do the work to be healthy, right? Because when you're healthy,
be whole.
Be whole. Yeah.
Wholeness.
I think that's a huge point because I'll give you an example. This is just this is so physical, but when my back goes out, that's a physical ailment, but I'll be jealous of my wife as a motherfucker, man. I'm telling you, there's something just to being about my back being out where I'll just, even the physical ailment messes me up in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And so to your point about being whole, being healthy, I totally agree with that.
It's not and the tough thing is, it's degrees. It's like an onion. I mean, you peel back one layer and there's another one. And that's the thing I do love about life is that we actually have the privilege to constantly be growing and to be progressing. I think as long as you're committed to freedom, there's a lot of latitude, a lot of grace that God has for you and that other people will have for you too. As long as you just, you're never home free and you never arrive. Just keep growing.
Yeah.
And conversations like this are good. I mean, just to get it out in the open. And my wife was telling me today, because I was off. She's like, man, you should go journal. I was like, yeah, I probably should. Gonna have a good podcast soon. Maybe that'll help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think the other thing you mentioned, Austin, I think was the more time that can go by, then you sort of get stuff growing up in that place, good stuff, almost like underbrush growing up in that place, which is good. Almost like underbrush growing over a pathway that you don't even want. That's definitely been my experience also. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Okay, let's wrap this up with the final thing on our docket, which is therapy culture.
But you don't have any mates?
Don't have any mates? Yeah, that was you that mentioned that recently, wasn't it, Austin, on this podcast?
That's a quoting movie somewhere, yeah.
Okay. What are you guys' thoughts on this? I'm just curious. We don't have to spend more than a few minutes on it, but is therapy underutilized, overutilized? Is it overglorified in our culture? Is it what most people need most of the time, or is it a reflection of sort of being weak culturally? And if that's the case, I will be quick to point out, even if this is an indication, like the therapy culture thing is an indication that we're kind of weak culturally, I will be quick to point out that even if that's the case, there's still people that should be getting therapy and hopefully are. But I'm just curious, what's you guys' read on this? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it indifferent? Because we definitely have, I think, a therapy culture, although Do I think it's waned a little bit in the last year or two? I'm not totally sure. I guess when I think about it, I kind of feel like almost it might have peaked a few years ago, maybe. But I don't know what you guys think.
It's hard for me to tell if it's peaked or not. I think there's good therapy that happens for people that need it, and I think there's a ton of bad therapy that happens, literally like damaging therapy that happens. I would say, I would say probably the majority to the vast majority is probably destructive in some sense.
Wow. Or because of the therapist, or because the
a combination of unhelpful frameworks, combination of limiting viewpoints and stories to unpack the deepest meaning of life because of artificial limitations placed on them by the frameworks they're working in. Some of it's incompetence, but I would say there's like the current generation of therapists who came through the system, let's say, they learned a lot of bullshit that's just not so. And there's just a lot of bad therapy that happens to younger and younger kids, and then you get it in the schools, and kids for sure. There's a guest making her rounds on the podcast circuit a couple months ago that was talking about bad therapy for kids. I think she was on Rogan and different people, but I tend to agree with, I resonated with what she was talking about. I think there's a lot of bad therapy that happens. I personally have benefited from therapy in some pretty limited ways, but helpful ways. I would say I've had one therapist that helped me with one thing, another one that maybe helped. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan, but I've used it to some benefit. And I'm a coach, so I'm into people transforming. But I think so. The one therapist that I actually kind of connected with left the therapeutic, resigned the license, I guess, or whatever, to go do more freewheeling kind of coaching with a wider purview of tools at their disposal. So,
okay, yep.
I think that I've tried it a couple times, different, it's never been in person because I live in a rural area. There's not many around here. I'd have to drive probably an hour and a half to get to one. So I've done a couple of online things, and it's just never. Again, I'm not against it. In fact, I recommend people get it sometimes. I just was someone the other day, look, this keeps coming up. I think there's a time and a place for it. I don't really know when that is. I just know for me personally, it's not really helped me a lot. What has helped me more has been leaders in my life calling me out, in different issues, and having conversations like this, even though that's not the intention, it gets you thinking.
Yeah.
Because really, all you need is the truth, and is the reality of your situation. What's the truth is what really sets you free.
Yeah.
Don't think you needed to pay a lot for it. There's things that happened to you that weren't your fault. But this whole thing, just not to vent, but one of those whole things of, I don't like that person because they don't make me feel safe. Is that the goal? Is that the goal? To feel safe or to feel free?
Yeah.
Maybe they're pushing on something that needs to be pushed on. And maybe you need to get angry at them, and maybe you need to duke it out to get to the heart of the issue. That's never been the goal, to be safe. It's to be free. I'm not against it. I have seen people do it.
Yeah, I think there's a sense in which it plays a necessary role, but the extent to which the role is necessary is largely predicated on the fact that we're in a post-Christian, kind of post-cultural moment where almost all of the normal structures that gave people's life kind of layers and meaning and richness, those structures are largely collapsing. And so there's a much higher rate of disconnectedness people, in their communities and all of that. And so I think therapy can play a role to kind of help ameliorate that to a certain degree, but it's it's like trying to stop, put your finger in a dam and, trying to stop a hole in a dam with your finger. Like, it just doesn't seem like the right long-term, like there's a longing for something deeper. There's a longing for transcendence. There's a longing for connectivity. There's a all of that. And I think the therapeutic effort is pretty limited in its ability to really produce those kinds of transformations. So,
yeah. This all comes back to us, like, being willing to do the work.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
To be whole. Like, a therapist might help point you in the right direction, but if you don't do the work after you get off the phone,
point. Absolutely.
It has no benefit.
100%. And this doesn't totally play into it, but when you think about the kind of people who inspire you to positive change, Austin, you mentioned the kind of people that call you on your bullshit and they're the kind of people that you desire to be shaped by.
Yeah. And
that's, I think, one beef I have. Like, when you just pick a therapist at random or you try to find the right therapist, is like, most times, there's a lot of people in that environment that I wouldn't look at objectively and say, I'd want my life to be shaped by them.
Right.
And that's a very important point because they are going to have, if they do their job right, they're going to have a lot of influence.
Yeah.
Even though there's sort of the schooling is that they don't, because they're not really supposed to give advice, but I think they still do have influence.
Totally.
Otherwise they wouldn't be enacting change, and that's kind of the point. Yeah, I think I fall pretty much with you guys. I've done counseling. I don't know what the difference is between counseling and therapy. Maybe it's just splitting hairs, but I've done counseling in three different seasons, and the first two, and a couple sessions in each of those seasons. The first one was probably 8, 9, 10 years ago, and that was very helpful. And then the next one was a couple years after that. That was also very helpful. That was with the same guy. And then a few years ago, I went for a couple more sessions with another counselor, and just wasn't. Honestly, he was too much like me. It was like, this is weird, dude. Like, you seem like a very goal-oriented dude that should be out building something right now, and this feels weird. But the first guy was very much like, not me. Like, just very kind of, his personality was, he's like this little scholar, super smart little scholar who's very helpful, very helpful. So my take is, I would want to do those first two seasons with a couple sessions in each of those seasons again. But there was a very clear problem, or there was a very clear hurdle I was looking to jump. And thankfully I was able to jump the first and also the second. Honestly, I think in this other guy's defense, I was a little less clear about the hurdle. I was looking to work through shame, I think, or something in particular on that last season. It just didn't really hit. But the fit wasn't quite right. But having experienced it, I would say that if that is what's needed, then you should do it, and you should find the right fit. I don't even know how it would work online, Austin, to be honest with you. That seems difficult. But I would probably say, I don't know what the percentage is, but I would probably say it's probably a lot of times getting done when maybe it's not totally needed, or it's getting done a little too quickly, or it's being put in the position of being an answer to everything that's going wrong in one's life. Mm-hmm. And that's just not what it's for.
Yeah.
I don't think that's outside the scope of work, really.
It should equal change. Like with you mentioned it, like
specific thing, move on.
You took a few sessions. There was obviously a course correction. There were some adjustments you had to make. At the end of the day, 95% of that was you doing the work. 5% was him telling you what was going on.
Right.
And you're not going to fix your life in an hour session once a week. It's just not going to work like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, but when I see church or shirts like Jesus in therapy and that type of thing, that just honestly it sort of grosses me out a little bit because it's just like, oh man, come on.
Well, it's the shirts that say that are always chuggy anyway. So you know what chuggy is?
What is that?
It's like
a Dutch word.
No, it's the word the kids use to describe kind of this uncool aesthetic. That's kind of what's the best way to describe? I don't actually know how to describe chuggy, but okay. So the kind of live, laugh, love kind of vibe. Chuggy, yeah.
Okay,
So.
I like it. Yeah,
I love the word.
So
yeah, I guess when I see something like that, it just to me it admits weakness and navel gazing, and that does not mean that people that have done therapy or counseling are weak. I did it, and I would do 2 of those 3 seasons again.
Yes.
But I'm not going to walk around wearing a shirt like Jesus in therapy. I'm in therapy. You know, got to have that therapy. Got to talk to my therapist. It's like, dude, come on.
How have you changed? That's what I want to know. How has this changed your life in a positive way?
Yeah. Well, there's also a lot of value in struggling through something and coming out the other side and not just taking all your problems to a therapist. You know, so all right, boys, let's wrap it up. This was fun.
good talk.
Good
Yes, sir.
talk.
Good talk.
Okay. Austin, anything you want to plug?
No.
Patrick?
Yeah, today was day 1 of not having any outside employment, so I'm all in on the Good King.
Bro.
So I'm plugging the Good King. So if you guys are looking for coaching and mentoring, come check out what we're doing at the Good King. Got a men's community, doing some one-on-one coaching, group coaching calls, seeing some good stuff happen. So it's pretty fun.
What's the URL for that, Patrick?
goodking.life. And
Goodking.life.
Instagram at goodking.life as well.
So today you did not go to the office.
I did not.
Wow.
Nope,
Congratulations, and I'm sorry, all at the same time.
It's good. It's good. It's I mean, what's the old Merle Haggard song? If we make it through December.
Yes.
So it's playing on repeat here.
I successfully lost 100 followers on X somehow. I'm not sure exactly what I said.
Yeah, I did too. I'm not sure how that. I just
Are you
noticed
serious?
that today. Yeah.
Man, it took me forever to get over 1,000 followers on X. I mean, I think I joined in 2013 or 2009. I don't know. Such a long time ago. And I drifted in and out of that platform, and I hadn't been on it for a number of years. But I've really, really enjoyed it in the last couple years. And I was even paying the little extra a month to get that little blue check mark, which you can pay for now. And apparently, you know, the hack with X is if you want more followers, which I'm not even really sure what the benefit of that is, but everyone seems to want more. If you reply to people on X, this doesn't really work, I don't think, on Instagram, or maybe it does, but if you reply to people and over the time of, I had one little tweet that kind of went, for me, it went totally viral. I had replied to a Bill Ackman tweet, something about, I think he had made the comment about, like, in support of Trump. Oh, he was saying A players pick A players and B players pick C players or whatever. And I had replied to his tweet and said, and he was talking about JD Vance, I think, and I said, you know, you could say this of his wife also because she seems like a really great person, whatever. And anyhow, it got like thousands of views and it really blew up and I got some followers. But my point is, if you can reply on X, you get followers apparently if you're saying good things. Finally, after decades, got over 1,000 and poof, lost like 100. I don't even know what happened. So now I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah, that's
all right, boys.
Tough game to play.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Okay, mettleandforge.com. People can leave us feedback on the podcast if they want to. There's a form. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you are enjoying it, maybe just tell someone about it because it's new and it's a podcast and it's a saturated market. No one knows about us yet, so we'd love to spread the word. If you guys could help us do that if you're enjoying it, and I think that's it. Bye, boys.
Goodbye.
See ya.
Love you guys.